What's up YouTube? Dan here from How To Skateboards, and today we're going to be setting up a complete skateboard. In this video, I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process of setting up a skateboard from start to finish. One of my skate lesson clients requested me to put together a complete skateboard that they'd like to buy for their son. They wanted the plank deck made by How To Skateboards, rainbow gradient grip tape by Almost, and these blue Sector 9 wheels. I recommended a set of bearings for them. Bearings are the skateboard part that goes inside of the wheel and it permits it to spin. You need 2 of these on each wheel, so 8 bearings total in a set for your skateboard. I also recommended these hollow trucks. Every skateboard needs a set of 2 trucks. You also need a set of hardware to put the trucks onto the board. Usually these are sold in a pack of 8 bolts and nuts. And you always want to pick a set of trucks that are the right size for the deck that you selected. This is an 8.5 deck, so I selected a set of trucks with an axle as wide as about the board itself, so that the ends of the axles here line up with about the end of the deck. That's usually what you want to go for, give or take, but be mindful of this when selecting your skateboard trucks. And for this particular setup, I'm throwing in a set of risers. What risers do is they go below the trucks, so the truck goes on top of it. And what these do is they create some additional space between the wheel and the deck to prevent wheel bite, which is when your board and the wheels make contact with one another. It causes your wheels to stop, lock up, and you could potentially go flying off your board. So we want to prevent this. We're throwing risers into this setup. And the reason for that is because these wheels are 61 millimeters tall. That is kind of on the larger side for skateboard wheels. Smaller wheels are usually about 50 millimeters or less. A larger wheel is usually 56 to 58 millimeters, but these are big ones. And they're gonna be great for this setup because this is for a beginner who wants to learn how to cruise around. So these are soft wheels, they're super smooth, they're gonna give them a great ride. Now that we've gone through all the components of a complete skateboard, here are 2 other things you might wanna have on hand when setting up your board. First, you'll definitely need a razor blade of some sort to cut the grip tape. You'll also want a skate tool so that you can easily assemble the board together. If you don't have a skate tool, you could probably put your board together with a ratchet and a screwdriver. You're just gonna need all the right attachments for it. All right, we're gonna start gripping the board. So what you wanna do first, you wanna remove the shrink wrap from your deck if there is shrink wrap on it. All How To skateboards come pre-shrink wrapped. How you doing, Plank? All right, the first step to applying grip tape is to remove the adhesive portion. A sheet of grip tape is just like a sticker. You've got this big sticky sheet attached to this base, and we need to peel this base off. Yep. All right, there we go. So as you'll see, this side of the grip tape is like a sticker. It's very sticky. So we need to be very careful right now and very intentional in how we apply it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna line up the grip tape so that it's gonna fit on the board perfectly in terms of length and width. And what I usually do is I layer it on starting from the back and then I move to the front. That's my way of preventing air bubbles. Everyone has their own different method of doing this. But what I like to do is I make sure it's all lined up and then I start pressing down from the back of it to the front. So I have it stuck onto the back now and I'm going to start applying. And I'm realizing now that it's not lined up great, so I need to adjust that as well. Make sure this is lined up straight. Yep, I'd say this is pretty good. All right, so now we're going to slowly start pressing down on it from the end, and we're gonna work our way to the front. So yeah, the number one thing you wanna avoid at this step is applying the grip tape too early. You don't wanna press it down all at once, otherwise you might get a lot of unwanted air bubbles. So I'm just gradually applying pressure, flattening it down, trying to make sure that anywhere where it is applied, it's applied fully and we're not going to get any air bubbles. The other thing you really want to focus on at this step is just making sure that the grip tape doesn't undershoot the board. So I made sure that this front is definitely going to get to the end of the board and the back is lined up towards the end, as well as making sure from a width perspective that the grip tape isn't totally off. So here we've got the whole board covered perfectly. So now I'm just going to do the finishing touches to pressing this down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get all the air out the sides like this. Make sure there's no air bubbles left. All right, so here we have the board has the grip tape applied, but we're not finished with this step. By the way, one trick a lot of people like to use to ensure the air bubbles are removed from the grip tape is they'll take the discarded piece of paper that was attached to the sheet, put it down on the board, and actually rub into it like this, just to make sure that you've ironed out any additional air bubbles. Now for this next step, you want to get something to sketch the outline of the board. You could use the side of the razor blade. You could even use your skate tool. I'm going to use this little metal piece. It's like a file. I'm just going to be rubbing the edge of the board so that it makes a nice outline so I know where to cut it. And you'll see very quickly what I mean by this. This is your outline, this is your sketch, this is your stencil. See, we got the outline starting to come together. If this was black grip tape, you would see it so much more clearly, these white lines around the board. So now we're gonna get into cutting it. And what it's all about is cutting as close as you can to the edge and trying to get as much grip tape off in one cut. This might be the most challenging part to get right when assembling a skateboard. So let's get into it. All right, so the bulk of the grip tape is now removed. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean it up around the edges. I'm gonna do a little bit of fine tuning. So that's gonna be a mix of me trimming any loose parts with the razor and then filing down the edges. So I'm using this as a file. Filing down the edges is super important just to make sure you have a very clean grip job, and it can also prevent the grip tape from getting ripped off the board. All right, I've trimmed off any loose ends, I filed it all the way around, and now we have a pretty clean grip job. Your first time gripping a board, you're not gonna be very good at it. It's not gonna come out clean. So this is something you'll just wanna work on and refine over time as you set up more boards. Now that the grip tape is fully applied to the board, we're gonna poke some holes in it so we can put in the bolts and screw on the trucks. What I usually do for this process, because it's very hard to see where the bolts are from this side of the board, I take the one screw, I put it through the hole on this side, I poke it through a little bit just so I can see an indent where the screw is supposed to be. I take this side of the skate tool, I have it meet the screw where it's at on this side of the board, and I poke the hole through like this. See that? Let's do it again. We're gonna do this on all 4 bolts on each side, so 8 bolts total. All right, now it's time to put the trucks on. What I usually do is I'll put the bolts through first for 4 of these, and I'll do one truck at a time. So I'm gonna insert 4 bolts on the top. All right, bolts are in. Now the most important thing when you're putting on the trucks is that you put them on the right way. You want this kingpin here to be pointing inwards, so that once the board is fully set up, you have a kingpin facing this way on this side, and then on the other side, the back side, the kingpin is facing this way. So they're both gonna be facing inwards. Do not confuse this, because on a longboard trucks actually face outwards. So it's the complete opposite. If this is a longboard, you'd want this kingpin to face outwards on both sides. But do not do that on a skateboard, otherwise your turning mechanism is going to be totally screwed up. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, we're going to be putting risers on this board. just to increase the distance between the wheels and the board since these are big wheels. Now what I like to do from here is I like to screw each nut onto the bolt just a little bit with my hands so it's secured. Then what I do from there, I take my skate tool and I tighten it all the way. All right, got each bolt screwed in a little bit. Now I'm gonna take my skate tool. I use the smallest piece right here to tighten the nut that makes the trucks attached to the board. From here, we just start tightening it. Now, one thing you do want to be mindful of is you don't want to tighten it too tight. You want to tighten it so it's pretty secure, but you don't want to be putting too much stress on the board with the level of tightness that you've created. Tighten it to the point where it's not too tight, but it's very securely on there. The trucks aren't wiggling around, they're secure, but the bolts are not digging into the wood and causing damage. That's what you want to avoid. All right, so the check I always do is I wiggle the truck around and it is securely fastened. So we're all set with that side. Now I'm gonna apply the trucks to the other side. And once that's on, we'll start with the wheels and bearings. Now both sets of trucks are securely attached to the board. You'll see, as I mentioned, that both kingpins are facing inwards. They're facing each other. That's gonna ensure that this board is gonna steer smoothly. Now we're almost at the end here. All we gotta do is apply the wheels and the bearings. Now I said applying grip tape is probably the most challenging part. Applying your bearings to your wheels is probably the most annoying part. First and foremost, something you're gonna wanna be aware of is that trucks come with these things, these little spacers, these washers. So what you'll see here is there's a little washer right here on the board, and there's a washer right here. 2 washers on each side of the trucks. And each washer is intended to sit between the trucks and one side of the wheel. So you'll have the washer on this side that goes in the inner part of the trucks. You'll have your wheel in the middle, and then another washer on the outside between the wheel and the nut that keeps the wheel securely on the board. This is to ensure that you can really tighten your wheels on your trucks, to ensure they are securely on there and are not causing any damage to the bearings. So keep your washers on there. They're gonna be super helpful to ensuring that your wheel is securely tightened, but can also roll very nicely. So what I'm gonna do is very carefully, I take the nut off of one side of the truck, and I take both washers off, and I make sure that I keep a very close eye on them. The last thing you want is to lose a washer. That's why this process is very annoying. Now, the other very annoying part of this process is actually getting your bearing inside of the wheel. So 2 bearings to a set of wheels. 1 bearing goes on one side, 1 bearing goes on the other side. Typically, you might have a little spacer that goes in between the 2 bearings inside of the wheel. These are called bearing spacers. This set of bearings does not come with spacers, so we're gonna go without them. But if you had spacers, what you would typically do is you apply 1 bearing, then you put the spacer in between the wheel, and then proceed to apply the second bearing. So typically you'd have 8 bearings and 4 spacers to a wheel. In this case, we just have 8 bearings, so our life is actually a lot easier. You could start by taking the bearing and start to push it into the wheel, like I'm doing right here. And then you're probably not gonna get it all the way. It's gonna be a little difficult. So what you do from there is you take your trucks and you use it as a tool to shove that bearing into the wheel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the wheel with the bearing partially lodged in. If I wasn't able to get it in at all, I could just put the bearing on the truck like this. Then I'll take my wheel, I'll line up the whole of the wheel so that the bearing is starting to get inserted. What I'll do is I'm just gonna press really hard on both sides of the truck to really nudge that bearing in. And there we have it. Now the bearing is inside of the wheel. Now, depending on the type of bearing, depending on the type of wheel, it can be very difficult to muscle that bearing in. And if you need to take your bearing out, you also use the truck for it. What you do is you'll kind of attack it at an angle and you'll twist the wheel until the bearing pops off like that. But yeah, taking bearings off your wheels or applying them to your wheels, it requires a little bit of muscle. So as I mentioned, put the bearing on the truck or have the bearing partially lodged in, and then you just push the bearing into the wheel using the truck as a tool to do so. All right, so we have the bearing on one side of the wheel. Now we got to put it on the other side. If you have bearing spacers, this is when you start to insert the bearing spacers into the wheel before putting that second bearing on. But we don't have those, so our life is easy. I just got to do what I just did here. Take the bearing, put it on the truck, take the wheel, take the empty side of it, insert it, and then push the bearing into the wheel. Usually you might hear a little click like that, and you should be good to go. Now I'm gonna take these washers from earlier. I'm gonna take one washer and put it onto the truck now. Then I'm gonna take my wheel, I'm gonna put it onto the truck, take the second washer, put it on this side of the wheel. Then I take the nut, tighten it as much as I can with my hands, screw it to the right. Then we take the skate tool, tighten the wheel onto the truck to the point where it's securely on there, but it can still spin. And see, we got a nice spin. It's spinning very nicely. You do want to be mindful of whether you can wiggle the wheel back and forth. If you can a little bit, that's usually a good thing, but you don't want it to have too much space to wiggle back and forth. Otherwise, you could risk the wheel flying off the nut. That would indicate the nut is not securely fastened. So you want to tighten it to the point where the wheel is securely on there and you are not restricting its ability to spin. I can't really wiggle the wheel on here that much, but I can spin it and it's got plenty of spinning to do. All right, now I'm gonna do what I just did there. I'm gonna apply all 4 wheels to the board. All right, so let's go through that one more time real quick. I take the nut off, I take the washers off, take the bearing, take the wheel, put them on the truck, muscle it in. Now we got one bearing in, get the other one, muscle it in. Beautiful. Not quite. Gotta try it again. Wasn't fully in there. And there we have it. Now I'm gonna take that other washer, put it in the truck, take the wheel, put it on the truck, take the other washer, now I put it on. Then take the nut, screw it in. Screw it in enough so that I can't really wiggle the wheel around. I'm not tightening it too much. I'm tightening it to the point where it can definitely spin a lot. I'm not preventing it from spinning whatsoever. All right, we got the front wheels on. I'm gonna put on the back wheels and then we should be good to go. All right, and there we have it. A fully assembled custom skateboard. This thing turned out great. I think it looks awesome. I think this kid is gonna have a very nice day when he gets this. So that was how to set up a skateboard from start to finish. If you have any questions at all about how to put together a skateboard from this video today, or any questions about parts in particular, whether it's wheels, bearings, trucks, if you need a recommendation, drop a comment below on this video and I'll be happy to address it. I hope you enjoyed watching this video today. I hope you found it helpful. And if you by chance need a skateboard, head over to howtoskateboards.com. We have pre-built complete skateboards from all the best brands. And if you send us a message directly, we can work together on even putting together a custom complete skateboard just like this for you. And if you're not in the market for a new skateboard, if you just want to learn how to skateboard, how to get better, subscribe to our channel and we will teach you how to skateboard.